Well guys, I've been putting it off long enough, and because of that, we have to close this retrospective on easily the most hated entry in the Resident Evil series. We all knew this day was coming, and in the words of a great man,
life is filled with its little miseries. Each of us, in his own way, must learn to deal with adversity in a mature and adult fashion.
Okay, here we go. What's up guys, I'm Jared from Avalanche Reviews. Welcome to the Resident Evil Retrospective. Around 2016, the esports craze was beginning to draw even mainstream attention. A boatload of games from a surprisingly varied pool of genres were starting to pull millions of dollars in ads and prize payouts. I remember being amazed when I caught a glimpse of ESPN running Counter-Strike tournaments. I expect to see a lot of things when I do security at my local bar, but the last thing I imagined would be getting to check out a few really tense CS matches. Well, Capcom's never been one to let a trend go unmolested and figured they needed to throw their hat into the esports ring. And when it came time to pick from their giant list of game franchises and decide who would become a fast-paced, action-packed competitive shooter, Capcom decided that one series that was known for its slow-building horror and methodical puzzle solving would be the best candidate. But there is good news, sort of. Learning from past mistakes, Capcom decided to keep this project in-house and put their Osaka studio to work right away. Obviously, the team took all their inspiration from Western-style online shooters, but as we'll see, you can take the game out of Japan, but you can't necessarily take Japan out of the game. An emphasis on keeping arenas small and tightly designed kind of bucked the trend of making these types of games more open at the time, and this approach seemed to keep team sizes pretty damn small. Now, I know that seems like a mundane thing to mention, but there really isn't any info out there regarding this game's development process, other than the fact that it was developed with Unity instead of Capcom's own MT framework, which we will be touching on in a bit. As you can imagine, a lack of any info kind of sucks, because out of this whole experience, I've had one burning question on my mind. One question that no one on the internet seems to be asking. Why is it that you have to scroll through 50 images of this game's logo and Steam banners before you ever see the words Resident Evil or Biohazard show up? Why is this game trying so hard to not be visually associated with the series that birthed it? You'd figure Capcom would want to take advantage of a little brand loyalty on the game's Steam page or really anywhere else, but that's not the case. Now I know the obvious answer might be that they feel like it's hurting the RE brand, but come on, these guys have never cared about that in the past. If you have any theories or info, post it in the comments section. Let's get to the bottom of this.
I'm gonna let you know, I'm looking right at you, dude. I'm waiting for you.
Now, typically this would be where I talk about an RE game's story, but there doesn't seem to be much to talk about, which should surprise no one. I mean, story and competitive online shooters don't exactly go hand in hand. The small amount of story we do have to work with is actually kind of okay in the realm of justifying a group of people getting into a gunfight in famous Resident Evil landmarks. The multiplayer portion of the game is set in 2016, long after the fall of Umbrella, and deals with a rogues gallery of shady companies looking to gain a leg up on the competition by visiting places where outbreaks took place and snagging a little bit of research. Now, I know what you're thinking. If the game takes place in 2016, how the hell are we looking at footage of Raccoon City right now? Well, the game sidesteps the nuclear plot hole by just saying these are recreations made for the purposes of training, which does explain why Kendo's gun shop is located directly next door to the RPD precinct, but really doesn't explain why people are coming here and shooting each other en masse. There is another portion of the game that for some reason gets a completely different story, however. The single-player portion of the game, aside from only technically counting as a video game, stars an up-and-coming Umbrella agent being tested by the corporation. But since it's set in 2013, we're talking the new Umbrella Corporation, established in RE7 to clean up bioterror around the world. According to experts, there are some small hints that the single-player character is actually Hunk, but honestly, that just kind of feels ridiculous. I guess Umbrella Corp didn't really have to include a story, so it's nice that they did, but I still kind of wish they would have gone with something more like Operation Raccoon City, a game that at least tried to do more than give a brief justification as to why you're playing it. Obviously, I wasn't expecting much, so it was nice to be a little surprised, but I find myself in a bit of a contradiction there. If the game had no story, I would have probably been a little annoyed, but I would have understood why. Since they decided to include at least an effort at one, I find myself wishing there was more. Now that I'm hearing myself say it, I kind of feel like I'm one of those impossible to please RE fans that I've heard so much about. Yeah, I guess the signs were there all along.
There it is.
Umbrella Corps plays like a competition shooter made by people who either aren't familiar with other online shooters or purposely try to do something different. I'm really not sure. Either way, we should probably start from the beginning. Right from the start, it's clear this is a multiplayer game first and foremost. Sure, there's a quote-unquote single-player mode, but excuse me if running through a few maps 3 or 4 times just killing BOWs isn't exactly what comes to mind when I think Resident Evil. But in all fairness, a multiplayer competitive shooter doesn't either. That being said, this game was clearly made with one purpose in mind, so let's flesh that out a bit. If you're looking to criticize Umbrella Corps, you're not going to get much traction in the variety of content department. This game actually offers up a respectable amount of game modes, character and weapon customization, and an okay amount of maps. Sure, each mode may be a slight variation on either deathmatch, point capture, or kill BOWs, but they're all relatively fun to play. Once you've got some players ready for a game, a subject that we will definitely be covering a little later, you can pick through a surprising amount of options and start your match. When you're actually in the game, you'll notice there is a few things to note right off the bat. First off is the odd perspective. The game uses a sort of halfway point between third and first person. It's a fairly narrow field of view, but what the game lacks in FOV, it makes up in mobility. Not since Quake 3 Arena have I played an FPS with movement this fast. Your character glides around the map with the press of one of the directions, and dashing is so fast it's almost hard to control. The other thing you're likely to notice is that you're sharing the arena with hordes of zombies and other BOWs, and I feel like this is probably one of the coolest game mechanics that UC brings to the table. Each player in the game is wearing what's called a zombie jammer, essentially making zombies not even notice you. You can walk right up to one and push them around, and they won't even so much as raise an eyebrow your way. But there are 2 ways this can change. In a fight, it's possible to damage one of these zombie jammers, which will mean any BOW in the general area will start tracking that player and doing their damnedest to take them out. The more interesting part is that zombies will aggro when they've been attacked. So if you're in the middle of a firefight and your opponent refuses to get out of cover, you could take a few shots at zombies around them. Once the dead start attacking, they may expose themselves, or if you get lucky, the BOWs may do your work for you. In the realm of fast-paced online shooters, this level of available tactics is pretty damn cool. It seems like Capcom was also pretty intent on vertical mobility too. Most surfaces can be climbed, although the implementation isn't the best. Getting into a firefight above the Spencer Mansion's dining room and accidentally jumping the handrails, making yourself an even bigger target, can be annoying as hell, but I can understand why they wouldn't require a button prompt for this, since running around a hectic arena with bullets flying overhead isn't exactly the right environment for a lot of button cues. Which makes me wonder why they took the opposite route for the cover system. And since we're on the subject, it can take a little while to get used to getting in and out of cover, but once you've got it down, there are a lot more options available than most shooters I can think of. On top of that, there's the obligatory melee weapon, which is kind of interesting in its own right. Once you pull this big bastard out, you get a wireframe that allows you to lock onto enemies for a single hit kill, which sort of reminds me of Halo 3's gravity hammer. The really odd thing about this is that just hitting the melee weapon while holding a gun does the same exact thing, at least damage-wise. You may not get a cool looking kill animation, but it seems odd they would give you 2 ways to accomplish the same exact action. Like I said before, game maps are actually pretty tightly designed. When you play a shooter like this, you tend to expect a huge arena to fight in, but the more sectioned off maps here make sure the comparatively small number of players in a match don't have to wander too far until they found a fresh target. There are even smaller versions of existing maps for situations when you can't get any more than one other person to play with you in a match, which transitions nicely into my largest gripe. Umbrella Corps is essentially a dead game. Sure, you can buy it, it still exists, but you stand no chance of actually coming across any active players in matchmaking. I honestly let matchmaking sit in the background as I wrote this script for longer than 30 minutes and never even got one single hit. Now, this subject alone might deserve an in-depth conversation about the fleeting nature of releasing a multiplayer-only game, but now's not the time or place for that. I'd much rather talk about a more interesting subject. Listen guys, I was dreading this game as I was installing it. I heard the reviews and a lot of you warned me, so imagine my surprise when I brought the game up, got a friend or two to join in, and found myself playing an okay game. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't a great experience that'll lock you in for hours at a time. It's just an average attempt at a multiplayer shooter. The shooting, movement, server stability, assets, mechanics, they all work about as well as you would expect for a run-of-the-mill deathmatch game. Aside from the really cool zombie mechanic and some great sound design, it's just boilerplate stuff. I honestly don't understand why this game got blasted so hard by the gaming press and RE fans alike, but I'm willing to take a few guesses. First off, this game came out hot off the heels of Revelations 2, a solid enough third-person shooter, but definitely not a part of any top RE games list. I think maybe fans were tired of getting games that were so wildly different from what they expected from the series. Whether you're like me, a fan of the old titles, or more of an RE4 third-person type of guy, this game simply didn't satisfy. Another possible reason for the hate is the fact that it offers no single player. I mean, sure, you probably shouldn't expect that from an online-only shooter, but this is a Resident Evil game, even if in name only. But the last point might be the most logical, at least in my opinion. My experience with this game comes from a very specific set of circumstances. I bought this for 99 cents with the collector's edition content included. This means not only did I spend less on Umbrella Corps than a pack of gum, but I also got almost all of the content that would otherwise be behind a paywall. At the time, paid DLC didn't get as much pushback as it does now, and devs took advantage of it. I'm sure I'd be less likely to enjoy myself if I saw nothing but links to buy content plastered all over these really cool assets. A little fun fact about myself is that I've only ever paid for 2 pieces of DLC in my adult life, so all of this would essentially have been unobtainable for me. And if you picked any of those reasons to hate the game, well, fair enough. I've been in similar situations, and I can understand where you're coming from, but I guess I was just expecting a train wreck and ended up getting a slight fender bender instead. Now that being said, I still would never recommend this game, as the absence of players makes it almost useless, and even if people were playing it, which they most certainly are not, but even if they were, it would still just be an average experience. One with a cool set of maps filled with zombies, but average nonetheless. Alright, anyone who's ever booted this game up will probably be able to guess the most interesting part of its presentation before I even say anything. And for those of you who haven't, let's take a look. Yeah, like some type of backwards-ass alternate universe, Capcom, a $1 million company who owns the rights to an incredibly versatile game engine, saw fit instead to license out Unity for this game. Now, I know after hearing that, you're probably waiting for me to reveal some big secret regarding why they would do this, but it seems like no one really knows why. There are a few fan theories out there, but not a lot of valid ones. Some people assume that this is due to the game being worked on by an outside company who would have had to pay for the rights to use MT Framework, but like I said before, this was handled in-house at Capcom's Osaka branch. Some people say it's because Unity is so cheap to license, but MT Framework would have been free, so I guess this is just going to have to remain a mystery until someone from the company comes forward, or someone in the comment section reveals some obvious knowledge that I completely looked over because I'm not exactly good at this, whichever comes first. But hey, the engine is less important when compared to the obvious question, does the game look good? And well, it does. I wouldn't exactly give this high marks as a full-budget AAA game, but I wasn't exactly expecting an online shooter to be pushing any boundaries in that department anyways. Overall, things really do look nice though. The lighting isn't exactly the best in the world, but small effects like reflections and a really nicely tuned motion blur makes the rapid mouse movements you'll be making seem more smooth and stylish. Character models all look essentially the same, but there's a good amount of customization that could be done to fix that. My copy came with face sets of Leon, Wesker, and Barry, but these make your character look like he has a huge head. The second most obvious visual theme is probably going to be the perspective, which is third person, but almost not. The camera stays locked to an insanely close position just over your character's shoulder, and despite a lot of flack this camera style got, I kind of liked it. I mean, don't get me wrong, the camera would have been terrible in games like RE4 or 5, but in a fast game where a relatively low field of view is compensated by a very quick look and turn speed, it just kind of looks stylish to me. I really enjoyed flying around any given map and seeing my avatar carrying their guns in that recognizably tactical fashion. Added little effects like wireframe targeting with melee weapons and cover pop-ups kind of look cool too. Of course, I needed to give special mention to the joy of seeing familiar locations being used as arenas, and even though they are really inaccurate, there is an in-game explanation, so I can't fault them too much for choosing function over form. Like I've said a million times at this point, little touches like this were all we had back before the RE2 remake was proven to be more than just vaporware. So we RE fans will always appreciate an opportunity to relive our memories with a nice new coat of paint, even if it means seeing Kendo's gun shop being directly next door to the RPD precinct. Zombies and other BOWs all look pretty damn cool, and it's awesome being able to see classic enemies in a new shiny way. I will say there's a definite lack of diversity, and it's a bit lame seeing these guys just melt into big piles of organs in a kind of cheap way, but I'm not about to freak out over that. As far as negatives go, I really don't have too many. Like I said, the lighting is a little flat, but I assume this was to make sure no one player had an advantage over anyone else thanks to an inclusion of some really flashy effect. Overall, I would say that this game looks pretty damn good, at least for what it is. There are a lot of rough corners, and the game lacks a certain level of control over graphical features, but that kind of ties into my one main criticism. The game just feels like it was rushed. Everything I saw that got on my nerves looked like the result of Umbrella Corps being released just a bit too early. I honestly feel like an extra 6 months would have solved issues like poor enemy diversity and a really crappy anti-aliasing solution, but I guess that would have been a wasted effort when looking at how little money the game actually ended up making. With all that in mind, I can say I'm torn here. For the 99 cents I spent, Umbrella Corps looks perfectly damn good, but I doubt I would have been pleased if I bought it at full price. That being said, I doubt anyone expects these type of shooters to blow them away visually. I mean, hell, the most popular competitive shooters right now can run perfectly on even the lowest spec PCs, and UC looks better than most of those titles, so in my opinion it looks perfectly okay. The perspective and engine it uses is probably the most interesting thing about the game, but we're talking about a failed project, so I guess this was all just a waste of time anyways. Kind of like the development of this game. All things said and done, I found Umbrella Corps perfectly playable. Sure, it wasn't going to take up hundreds of hours of my life, but based on the limited multiplayer experience I had, this would have probably made for a few really good matches and a couple of laughs. I couldn't exactly say why it failed so hard since I'm not exactly an expert in these types of games, but I also couldn't find anything obviously broken with it. It played well enough and had a good amount of options when it came to customizing gear and character models. It is important to admit that the dead nature of the game meant I wasn't able to see if full teams would cause poor server performance or any exploitable gameplay glitches, but as far as my untrained eye could see, the game doesn't deserve the worst RE game ever title, as so many people are giving it. Sure, it's not an amazing game, but it's even more competently made than Operation Raccoon City, which somehow wormed its way into my heart as a guilty pleasure. Thanks to this game being more dead than the zombies in its arenas, I wouldn't recommend anyone go out and buy it, but if you have a spare $1 or $2, grab a digital copy on sale and give it a look. As for hardcore RE fans not interested in failed online games turned into ghost towns, you're definitely not missing out here. And with that, we have officially covered every full Resident Evil title ever released. I want to thank all of you for joining me on this year-long adventure, and anyone who supported it. Whether or not you became a patron, shared a video, or just left a nice comment, I appreciate all of your support, and I really want to make sure that you know I wouldn't be here without you guys. As for the future of this series, well, don't worry, this is certainly not the end. As Resident Evil seems to have picked up some new steam lately, count on a new entry in the retrospective for every new Resident Evil game. As long as RE lives, so will the retrospective. As for the non-RE future of the channel, well, best believe I'll be diving into another full series retrospective just as soon as I flex my creative muscles with a few standalone reviews. And if you're wondering what game dynasty is up next, well, we'll just have to wait and see. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you're interested in seeing this retrospective from beginning to end, the playlist will be right here, and please click that subscribe button because it helps out a lot. I think that's it, but thanks everyone for watching and for hanging out with me for this very long project. Here's to another one in the future. See you guys later.